Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Jeffrey Epstein Show. I'm your host, Bobbycapucci, and this is a morning update. Today, we're going to continue our discussion on the FinCen files, and we're going to talk about how money laundering, one of Jeffrey Epstein's specialties, has caused devastation the world over. You see, money laundering is the lifeblood for all of these crimes. And these banks that are supposed to be the bulwark, they're supposed to be the buffer zone. No, they aren't. A lot of times you see that these banks look the other way. And sometimes these banks are even complicit in helping these people stash this money, launder this money, and wash this money. And what the FinCen files have done, and this great reporting by BuzzFeed and the consortium of journalists who have been involved, it has exposed this for the world to see. You know, it's one thing when your friend is always railing about the banking system to you, right? You know, your buddy who you think's pretty smart maybe, but you don't want to hear it anymore about the banking system. Oh, who cares? It's not as corrupt as you say. Stop it. More conspiracy theory nonsense. And then you see these FinCen files drop. And if you don't take note, and you don't stop what you're doing and pay attention to what these banks are up to, even after we have seen it with our own eyes now with this FinCen file drop and the Panama file papers, etc., then you are being cognitively dissonant, all right? Because these banks do not have your best interest at heart. You are nothing but a dollar sign to them. Even the poorest amongst us, right? The whole idea is to keep everybody a slave to credit, to keep everybody in their back pocket. And when the shit goes down, guess who's going to bail them out? Me and you. But when we're in the middle of a huge pandemic and the citizens of the world need some help, where are the bankers, folks? Has your local banker offered to help out? I highly doubt it. And neither have the corporate bankers. If it wasn't for the moratorium on evictions and kicking people out of their homes, forget it. These banks would have already been diving on in. They are literally the most evil people in the whole entire world, in my opinion. These high-level banking types. These are the kind of people that do not care about anything but increasing their own wealth and their own power. And that is exactly what the FinCen files have shown us thus far. So today, in our third part of the FinCen files, while we have some time, considering we have a pretty slow week in Epstein news, and that this ties in very well with our story, this is our third article in regards to the FinCen files. This article was published by the International Consortium of Investigative Journalists. The author, Will Fitzgibbon. Headline: Unchecked by global banks, dirty cash destroys dreams and lives. From Ukraine to the United States, from Tunisia to Turkmenistan, a global ICIJ investigation details the punishing human cost of laundered trillions. With a T, folks. Not an M, not a B, a T. And it has long-reaching consequences. We don't ever think about money laundering affecting us, right? I mean, we don't ever really think about it as a whole when we're talking about the population. It's not like the gaslighting media is blasting you with that, right? They're not talking about money laundering or anything of the sort because, well, they don't want to out themselves and their boys and their bosses. So the media just continues to gaslight about shit that doesn't even matter. Just the most nonsensical BS I've ever seen in my life. And all it is meant to do is rile everybody up so that they hate each other, so that they're at each other's throats. In the meantime, though, while you're all doing that, the man behind the curtain is still laundering trillions, is still sex trafficking children, and doing whatever else that they think that they should be doing to consolidate their power, all the while laughing at you for your nonsense. See how it works? The idea is to no longer let them control that narrative, to no longer listen to the rage porn that the legacy media is dropping on a daily basis. It's time we focus on things that are important, folks. Like this, like these crooks, these money launderers. Because it's not just money laundering. They use this laundered money to kick all of their operations into gear, including the Jeffrey Epstein criminal enterprise. Emily Spell heard the screams from outside her parents' red brick home. She found her brother, Joseph Williams, 31, splayed on a mattress in the basement. His eyes, half open, were yellow. His lips were blue. His wife, Christina, was pounding on his chest. "Joe, wake up! Joe, wake up!" Christina hollered. Spell, a nursing student, started CPR. Each time she pressed down on his chest, white foam spluttered from Joe's mouth and onto his favorite Batman pajamas. It's sad stuff, folks. This is the story for a lot of American families. Overdose, death, extreme drug use. Joe's mother, who'd race home from work at Piggly Wiggly, a regional grocery store in Garland, North Carolina, tore into the room. She lay down beside her only son. "It's okay, baby. You can go ahead and sleep," Susan Williams said. Do you want a cigarette? Are you cold?" "I thought my mama had lost her mind," Emily remembers. Of course he was cold. Because he was dead. And look, I don't know if any of you have ever dealt with losing somebody to a drug overdose. I'm sure a lot of you out there have, somebody close to you. I lost an uncle to a drug overdose, and it is not a good feeling or a good situation. So I totally get it. I have a lot of empathy for people who have went through this. I have a lot of empathy for people that are going through it with addicted relatives, people who are sick. And it is a disease. I know we get frustrated and we want to, strike out and force them to change, but it's impossible to do that, right? And it is just the cycle that we find ourselves in this country when it comes to heroin overdoses, especially. Well, now it's fentanyl, but it is a real plague and a problem, folks, a big problem. Joe's family didn't know what killed him. They had no idea that he was one of the first of tens of thousands of Americans who would be felled by fentanyl, the deadliest narcotic in the world. And even after they saw the autopsy report, it wasn't until much later that they learned of the global forces responsible for Joe's death. And you know that the fentanyl doesn't just show up here, right? Just like the crack didn't just show up here. The CIA imported that crack to those black communities and those poor communities. That's just a fact, folks, okay? The whole entire war on drugs has been aimed at poor people, simply to keep these prisons populated. And it is an absolute sham. We're going to put people in prison for having drug addictions, but these banksters are able to continue sowing their mass murder from continent to continent with no repercussions, huh? It took a network of traffickers stretching back to China, relying on the easy movement of dirty money through brand-name financial institutions to deliver lab-designed opioids to rural North Carolina and across the U.S. And that's what we're talking about here, right? The dirty money that pumps blood through the very heart of the underworld. And they're being assisted by these banks. The very same people who were running with Jeffrey Epstein. The same people who were facilitating his transactions. The same people that protected him. New details about how money powered the fentanyl drug ring and more than $2 trillion in other suspect funds sloshed around the globe are contained in a cache of secret financial records obtained by BuzzFeed News and shared with the International Consortium of Investigative Journalists. Again, I am not a big fan of BuzzFeed for the most part. I don't like salacious hit pieces when it comes to politics. All right, I want to talk about policy and nuanced thought. not cudgel hit pieces. And a lot of times that's what BuzzFeed produces, right? Let's be fair. But when it comes to this piece here, they did killer work and they have to be lauded for it. This is dangerous work too, folks. These are not people that take this kind of stuff sitting down lightly. The files, known as Suspicious Activity Reports, or SARS, provide a worldwide tour of crime, corruption, and inequality, with starring roles played by the politicians, oligarchs, and honey-tongued swindlers, and crucial roles by the bankers who serve them all. Look, they just explained so-called polite society, right? Politicians, oligarchs, honey-tongued swindlers, and the bankers that make it all possible. Folks, look, I'm not a religious guy. In fact, I'm agnostic as they come. But the bankers and the lenders even made Jesus Christ pissed off, right? If you're making Jesus pissed off, you have to be some sort of scumball. And that, my friends, is what I see when I look at the banking system as a whole. They are absolutely corrupt from the core. The SARS show how the failure of banks and other financial institutions to thwart illicit money flows promotes criminality and suffering on a grand scale. How long have we been talking about that here on the podcast? About how money laundering is the lifeblood. You know, everybody wants to talk about follow the money, follow the money, follow the money. Well, this is where you follow the money. This is the trail here, folks. This is how we punch the ball over the goal line. This sort of stuff right here. All of this ties into the Jeffrey Epstein case like no other. It's very important that we understand the full scope of what we're dealing with. We're not dealing with people hiding in bushes, right? No boogeymen. These people are some of the most powerful, influential people amongst us. And they've gotten away with mass murder, mass theft, and Lord knows what else for way too long. In a world beset by headline-grabbing crisis, including a coronavirus pandemic that is destroying lives and economies, the unchecked piping of dirty money may not register as an immediate threat. But the consequence is profound. Narco-traffickers and Ponzi schemers shift profits beyond the reach of authorities. And they're 100% right. It's hard to focus on something like this right now. I understand. Look, there's a lot going on, man. All of us are dealing with, internalized anxiety, fear for our families, our futures. We don't know what's coming down the pipe, if we're going to have jobs or if we're going to, be able to take care of ourselves, whatever it may be. There is a lot of thoughts where we don't know what's coming down the pipe, right? People just don't know. So it's hard to focus on something like this. Money laundering happens all the time, but it is crucial that we understand the role of the money that is laundered and how without that lifeblood, the heart would stop pumping. Despots and corrupt captains of industry swell ill-gotten fortunes and consolidate power. Governments, starved of revenue, can't afford medicine to treat the sick. And how many times do we see oligarchs in these countries, these poor countries? They steal all of the wealth, and their people are lucky to get themselves a little bit of bread and maybe some, some sort of mystery meat. Meanwhile, these oligarchs are sitting in their palaces, eating like kings, and there's nobody steps in to do anything about it, right? None of these bankers sanction them. None of these institutions step in to stop the flow of money to these people. They don't care. Why should they care about the poorest people in the world? Why should they care about you? At the heart of these stories are real people hurt in real ways. Families that have lost savings to predatory financial schemes. Olympic athletes cheated of victories by crooked officials. Parents mourning sons and daughters fallen in battle. A mother crushed at work and a brother taken by drugs. Joe Williams' family and other victims often don't know that their pain is, in part, the product of financial crimes or a violation of Title 18, United States Code Section 1956, laundering of monetary instruments. Folks, I can assure you that a lot of the pain and a lot of the suffering around us and in the world is caused by exactly this. People may not be aware of issues like money laundering and offshore companies, but they feel the effects every day because these are what make large-scale crime pay. From opioids to arms trafficking to stealing COVID-19 related unemployment benefits, said Jody Vittori, a corruption expert at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. And it's true. This is a big underlying issue that a lot of people aren't even aware of. People don't understand the scope, right? They hear of money laundering and they think, a crooked white collar businessman hanging out at the golf club. While that may be the case, it's the owner of the golf club that you need to worry about. But criminal networks and the law enforcement officials trying to stop them understand that an untamed tide of dirty cash is the single most important requirement of a successful criminal enterprise. What have I been telling you about Jeffrey Epstein? Why do you think I have been so adamant that we stay on the money chase? We need to secure that bag, folks. It's the only way we're going to take down these co-conspirators. I don't care what everybody else talks about, all right? About how they need to go after this one or that one about this or that or stuff that is unfounded in reality half the time. Meanwhile, there are real financial crimes that were committed by everybody around Jeffrey Epstein, it looks like. So if you're serious about justice and you're serious about these people tasting a little bit of it, well, here is where we start, folks. Follow the money. Brandon Hubbard, in prison for life for importing fentanyl in the scheme that killed Joe, remembers that the police who arrested him seemed more interested in where the cash went than the powder known as China White. That's the first thing they asked me when they came in my door, Hubbard said in an interview from prison. Where's the money? Hubbard denied that he knew or distributed drugs to Joe Williams. And here you have what I call the pinch. You have a low-level drug dealer, Hubbard here, who should be facing criminal action for selling this dude the fentanyl that killed him, right? I get it. I understand. But he is not really the problem, folks. He is a symptom of the disease. And the disease is this banking system that doesn't give a spit about any of us. The leaked documents, known as the FinCen files, include more than 2,100 suspicious activity reports written by banks and other financial players and submitted to the U.S. Treasury Department's Financial Crimes Enforcement Network. According to BuzzFeed News, some of the records were gathered as part of U.S. Congressional Committee investigations into Russia interference in the 2016 U.S. presidential election, while others were gathered following requests to FinCen from law enforcement agencies. Well, it doesn't shock me that there were congressional committee leaks during the 2016 so-called Russia investigation. We know that the committees in Congress leak like it's nobody's business, and that they can't be trusted with anything that's sensitive. The report's dense technical information bulletins are the most detailed U.S. Treasury records ever leaked. They disclose payments processed by major banks, including HSBC, oh, shocking, Deutsche Bank, oh, involved with Epstein, JP Morgan, oh yeah, involved in Epstein, Chase and Barclays, involved with Epstein. They describe journeys of dirty money that zigzag inexplicably around the world, from a kleptocrat's spoils or a front company on the Atlantic coast, for example, via Wall Street Bank to a sun-kissed tax haven in the Caribbean, Singapore Tower Block, or the financier in Damascus. And that's how it works, right? We've seen it with Epstein's companies up close. We've seen it with the banks that came back to life, and we have seen it with the way his bankers went about their structuring, going to the bank 97 different times and taking out $7,500 per clip. We've talked about this. A lot, folks. So when the FinCen files dropped, you should probably already know that your boy was fired up and couldn't wait to run this into our story as well, because it's very relevant to what we're talking about. Very relevant. SARs are not evidence of wrongdoing, but they reflect views by watchdogs within banks known as compliance officers, reporting past transactions that bore hallmarks of a financial crime or that involved clients with high-risk profiles or past run-ins with the law. And remember what I was saying about compliance officers. I would say that the vast majority of these compliance officers are good people who want to do their job and make sure that they don't put their institutions at risk. But like with any other group of people, there are bad ones. And when you have people from on high, CEOs, directing you to look the other way, when you have, say, high-risk transactions occurring, well, then we're entering a whole different realm, right? And it can happen. None of this money laundering could happen without people being helpful to it in the compliance office. FinCen told BuzzFeed News and the ICIJ that it does not comment on the existence or non-existence of specific SARs. It released a statement about unnamed media outlets that said the unauthorized disclosure of SARs is a crime that can impact the national security of the United States. The same thing they said about the WikiLeaks drops. I remember being blown away by people. I couldn't believe what I was hearing, by people who were actually saying that nobody should look at those WikiLeaks. Oh, it was illegal to even look at them. Don't look at the WikiLeaks. We'll tell you what's in them, is what Cuomo told us. And then there are still people who challenge me on WikiLeaks. Here's the deal. Go and read them for yourself, okay? And then when you're done doing that, go and write a letter to your congressmen and your senators and the president and everybody else and tell them to free Julian Assange. Days before ICIJ and its partners released the FinCen files investigation, the agency announced it was seeking public comments on ways to improve the U.S. anti-money laundering system. You're relying on the public? How much money is at your fingertips? How many so-called experts do you have working for you? And you're relying on the public? Well, here's my advice. Blow the whole damn thing up. How about that? The whole entire banking system needs to be restructured, and we need to move back to community banking. 400 journalists from almost 90 countries burrowed into the leaked records, often emerging with a thin thread of just one name or one address. They spent 16 months prying additional documents from sources, reading through court and archival records, interviewing crime fighters and crime victims, and reviewing data on millions of transactions that took place between 1999 and 2017. Sparked by the secret files, reporters traced a Rhode Island drug dealer's dollars to a chemist lab in, oh boy, this is getcha, in Wuhan, China. A chemist lab in Wuhan, China, huh? What else was he making there? Could it be SARS-CoV-2 maybe? I mean, while we're at it, 2020 is that batshit crazy, right? No pun intended. Explored scandals that crippled economies in Africa and Eastern Europe, and tracked tomb raiders who looted ancient Buddhist artifacts that were sold to New York galleries. Well, it wouldn't be too hard to get your hands on some ancient Buddhist artifacts, right? After the Taliban did what they did in Afghanistan. They had all sorts of artifacts, and we saw the same in Iraq and Syria, and anywhere where we have conflict, you see these Tomb Raider types diving in and stealing the histories right from under our noses. The dozens of political figures who feature in the documents include Paul Manafort, the former Donald Trump campaign manager, who was convicted of fraud and tax evasion. Manafort has always been a scumbag, folks, going all the way back to his time when he was working with Roger Stone in the Nixon era. All right? Guy is an absolute scumbag, always has been a scumbag, and if anyone thought he wasn't a thief, well, you were wrong. JP Morgan reported that it moved money between Manafort and his associate shell companies as recently as September 2017, long after his ties to Russia-connected Ukrainian officials and suspected money laundering had been widely reported. Often the person tied to a suspect transaction was a one-step removed from the bold-faced name. A child, an associate, or in the case of Atiku Abubakar, a former Nigerian vice president, accused of diverting $125 million from an oil development fund, a wife. After corruption allegations against her husband resurfaced, Rukuyatu Abubakar moved more than $1 million of his money through Habib Bank to a company in the United Arab Emirates to buy an apartment in Dubai. Atiku Abubakar has not been tried in court and denies wrongdoing. Of course, these people don't go to court. They don't go to trial. Are you kidding me? There's no system set up for these people. Oh, you have to pay a fine. Your company has to pay a fine. Meanwhile, if you or I miss our taxes or we do anything wrong, forget it. They're sending us to Guantanamo Bay and calling us a terrorist. Dozens of stories across the FinCen files investigation trace money transfers like these from foreign capitals to companies that exist only on paper, handled by global banks that have long catered to oligarchs and despots and have felt little real pressure to stop. This system has had lasting consequences that ravage the lives of people like those you may know. It is, without a doubt, folks, without a doubt, one of the biggest problems in the world. And we have a little taste of it here in our case, right? For those of you who might not be too familiar with how corrupt the system is around the world and how much these people are involved in money laundering, this has to be an eye-opener for you. And I know that just following the Epstein case had to have wet your beak a little bit about how corrupt these people are. So this is another nice look behind the curtain for you, and it really plays into our discussion big time. And it's very important that we understand what is going on when it comes to this money laundering and these criminal banksters. It's very important that we understand it if we're going to understand how to bring down Jeffrey Epstein's co-conspirators. An Australian aromatherapist sent $50,000 to a cryptocurrency scam run out of the United States, Bulgaria, and Thailand. A Texas retiree thought that he had found true love with an Austin college student he met online and paid into a Bank of America account owned by a failed Nigerian politician. Russian parents who need to ferry their sick child to a hospital in St. Petersburg wired $15,000 to a used car salesman in New Jersey who promised but never delivered a second-hand Honda. And a North Carolina man nursing a secret addiction paid a few dollars for a white powder that traversed 3 countries and ended his life. Look, I know a lot of people who have been caught up in the drug world, right? And I know a lot of people who have purchased drugs online. It's a scary, scary world, folks. And when you have these big banks facilitating it, it becomes even scarier. An overdose in Garland. Emily, what the hell is fentanyl? Joe Williams' mother was standing in her daughter's kitchen holding the toxicology report that had arrived in the mail that day in 2014. Emily Spell had heard of the opioid in nursing school. Like a pain medication they give to cancer patients, she responded. Williams, a father of 4, lived on the eastern border of Garland, home to just over 600 people, blueberry fields and hog farms. Greatness grows in Garland is a town slogan, but evidence of that greatness has been harder for some people of Joe's generation to find. New homes have been built in years, and local leaders recently disbanded the police force due to budget constraints. The town has been hit hard by the COVID-19 pandemic. Look, none of this stuff would ever occur if we had real oversight over these bankers, right? On a recent summer day, locals, some wearing face masks, refilled propane canisters outside the bustling Piggly Wiggly and ordered cheesy sandwiches from Subway. The Curiosity Shop and other businesses in the center of town were closed. Weed shot up out of cracks in the empty asphalt car park outside the shuttered Brooks Brothers shirt factory. Emily knew that her brother used drugs. He was arrested in 10th grade for bringing marijuana to school and more recently had pawned his father's work tools to buy cocaine. Another situation that has rocked most of us. I mean, how many of us out there haven't had a relative who got caught up in the drug game and stole from them or broke into their home and took some of their tools or whatever it may be? I know I've been through it, folks. It ain't fun. It's not pretty. And all of it is facilitated by this goddamn disgusting money laundering. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm a self-responsibility kind of cat, too. These people that take drugs, they do bear some responsibility, right? They're the ones who took the drugs. But at the same time, we have to understand that they're sick and they need help. They don't need to go to prison. You know who needs to go to prison? The banksters who facilitated all of this money laundering. They need to go to prison. But the family didn't realize how much and how often the healthy-looking 6-foot, 200-pound plus Joe Williams used. Emily's Joe was a guy who pulled funny faces in family photos, who, when they were kids, placed her in gentle chokeholds as they watched professional wrestling, and sneaked into her room at night to sleep because he was scared of the dark. You know, this shit hits close to home for me. This is hard stuff for me to read. You know, losing my uncle the way I did and seeing so many of my friends get caught up in this shit. It's just a rough subject. And it really just... It makes me want to charge harder. It makes me want to expose the corruption of these banksters and these disgusting institutions that much more, folks. As an adult, Williams bounced between jobs, played plenty of Call of Duty, and kept his drug addiction a secret. Days before his death, Williams received a package mailed from Canada with 5 painkillers and fentanyl powder. In 2017, U.S. prosecutors named Williams, referred to only by his initials JW, as the first American victim of a global plot to distribute deadly drugs. And the heroin problem is just so big in a lot of these smaller communities, right? A lot of these, I know there's places in West Virginia where, you know, the sound that a pill bottle shakes, they call that the mating call of certain places in West Virginia because the opioid problem is so out of control. Next year, a federal judge in Fargo, North Dakota, will sentence Anthony Gomez, who pleaded guilty to conspiring to launder money and to distribute drugs that killed Joe Williams and other Americans. Well, that's all fine and well, but what about the banks that helped him launder it? All right? I mean, I get it. I understand that Mr. Gomez has to face the music, right? He was involved in some criminal activity. Someone died. He has to face the music. But what about the money laundering banksters? Do they ever have to face the music? Authorities arrested Gomez near Fort Lauderdale, Florida in 2017, not far from his $850,000 6-bedroom Tudor cottage bought, prosecutors alleged, with drug money. Investigators seized $150,000, Gomez's Maserati sports car, and an all-terrain vehicle. For years, Gomez and his girlfriend Elizabeth Tan sent bank transfers and money wires to China and Canada, where the group's ringleader operated from his jail cell. So again, Gomez is a problem, right? Street level guys, there needs to be punishment for them if they're breaking the law, but I want to follow the money all the way back to the man in charge. That's what I'm looking for. I'm not looking for these little arrests just to make people feel good. I want the whole entire operation destroyed. Prosecutors said Gomez, Tun, and other members of the drug and money laundering conspiracy used offshore accounts, money transfers, a Bank of America account, and encrypted communications to conceal their operations. Another Bank of America story. Another big-ass bank involved. And yet no penalties for them, but don't, have an overdraft charge or anything. You better believe they're going to make sure you pay that. Don't default on your car loan. You better believe you're going to have to pay that. But the banks themselves, the entities, no responsibility for anything. No repercussions for anything. In an undated spreadsheet from the FinCen files, Gomez and 8 others are linked to payments totaling more than $403,000 made between 2012 and 2017 via MoneyGram International, a Dallas-based money transfer firm that in 2018 paid $125 million in penalties to U.S. authorities for violating a settlement with U.S. authorities intended to stop laundering and fraud. I'm sorry, folks, but I'm tired of these financial penalties. Is that all that's going to happen? Obviously, it's not enough of a deterrent because it keeps occurring. And we just keep on going, huh? The American government, what do they do with that $125 million? Who gets that? Where does it go? The FinCen Files spreadsheet, a bare-bones list of more than 1,500 suspicious activity reports, was titled VTB Bank Export, referring to a state-owned Russian institution known as Russian President Vladimir Putin's piggy bank. The U.S. Treasury Department sanctioned VTB Bank in 2014 in response to Russia's annexation of Ukraine's Crimean Peninsula. It is unclear what connection VTB Bank had to the MoneyGram transfers or why the document was created. Oh, I'm sure that it will become clear if the investigation continues because there's obviously something there. Why would you be doing business with anybody that Vladimir Putin is doing business with? It just blows my mind that these companies, these MoneyGram type companies, would continue to do business with these oligarchs. VTB Bank said that it operates strictly according to local and international laws and complies fully with all local and global regulatory standards. The bank has not received any complaints about our activities from USA authorities and is unable to comment on this matter as we have not been given access to the relevant documentation that the query refers to. Yeah, of course not. They have no idea. Nobody knows anything, right? None of these people ever know anything. And the U.S. authorities are worthless. What have they done? What have the SEC done? What has the federal government done? Nothing. Continue to raid our future. They continue to make us pay for the bank's mistakes. 3 of the 8 people named with Gomez in the spreadsheet have been charged with or convicted of drug trafficking. One, Xiaobing Yang, is the first manufacturer of fentanyl to be indicted in U.S. history. Yan, 43, operated out of Wuhan, China, and is still wanted by U.S. authorities. He denies breaking Chinese laws or knowingly selling substances banned in the U.S. What in the hell's going on in Wuhan? What next? A Godzilla sighting out of Wuhan? Probably time to get rid of that whole entire city, right? What did they say in Aliens? We better nuke them from space. It's the only way to be sure. I mean, I'm only kidding, obviously, but damn, what the hell is going on in Wuhan? And while you're at it, make sure you close the wet markets. The other 2 were Tun, Gomez's girlfriend, and Darius Gahari. Both were charged with fentanyl-related crimes in 2017. MoneyGram reported suspicious transfer tied to Gahari more than a decade after New Jersey authorities fined him in a high-profile internet fraud case. It is unclear exactly who paid whom and the exact route the fentanyl took to reach Garland. U.S. prosecutors trying Gomez's case declined to answer ICIJ's questions, citing ongoing litigation. Oh yeah, shocking. Ongoing litigation, right? Anytime they don't want you to know something, they will for sure tell you that there's an investigation that's ongoing. You can't have that information until we're done. A day laborer in Turkmenistan. The flour, when it arrived at the store, smelled foul. The oil was black and bitter. It was 2016, and Turkmenistan's economy was spiraling downward. The proof foraged from dumpsters. Within 2 years, inflation would be second only to Venezuela's. And I understand how Turkmenistan's economy could get blasted, but Venezuela had no excuse. They were such a vibrant, thriving economy for so long. And then the elite ruling class had to take over, had to privatize everything, had to get rid of the private sector. And now we see just how shitty Venezuela is. By day, laborers lugged sacks of cement by bicycle for a few manat, the Central Asian country's currency, which seemed to shrink in value overnight. In the evenings, husbands and fathers crowded outside black plastic doors of government-owned supermarkets, where shelves were empty except for overpriced imports. There was never enough to eat, one Turkman, a day laborer from the southern oasis town of Mary, told ICIJ. He asked not to be named for fear of putting his family at risk. People waited for flour until midnight, and the shop owners could not say when it would come. This year, the nonprofit Freedom House ranked Turkmenistan more repressive than North Korea and one of the 4 worst of the worst countries in the world for political and civil rights. Experts say that nothing happens without the approval of the president. Oh boy, I'm gonna slaughter this name. Gurbanguly Berdimuhamedov. I think that's how you say that name. And how many times do we see it with these kind of people, especially over there in like these old satellite states of the Soviet Union? Forget it. These guys are running their kingdoms like it was the 10th century. In Ashgabat, the capital, citizens cannot withdraw more than $23 a day from the bank. They cannot open a window along an avenue along which Berdimuhamedov may pass. This year, the president reportedly banned the word coronavirus. And these are the people that the banks keep doing business with. These sort of dictators, these sort of two-bit despots that keep their people completely under their thumb are treated like gold by these banks. The capital's name, Ashgabat, means city of love. Because of the hunger, police state repression, and corruption, many know it by another name, City of the Dead. Corruption in Ashgabat, as in many of the world's capital cities, is sustained by the movement of money through offshore outposts and often through some of the world's richest banks. Oh yeah, the banksters love this shit. They love these undeveloped countries where they can rape and pillage with the approval of whatever dictator is running the place, as long as the dictator gets a few pennies on the dollar. It's just an absurd system that we have in place, folks. Nearly 36 suspicious activity reports reviewed by ICIJ described payments linked to the Turkmenistan and totaling $1.4 billion between 2001 and 2016. Suspicious does not necessarily mean illicit, but bank compliance officers watching the transfers determined that they deserved more scrutiny. The wires appear suspicious because they were often sent in a repetitive nature and typically involve suspected shell-like entities. An employee in Bank of New York Mellon's legal department wrote off nearly $100 million in transfers during the last 3 months of 2016. Boy, isn't that nice, huh? Imagine being able to write off $100 million in transfers. These people are operating in a completely different reality than the rest of us. Some UK-based companies received money from Turkmenistan even though they had reported to regulators that they weren't actively engaged in any business, according to an ICIJ analysis. In one case, Turkmenistan's trade ministry sent $1.6 million to a company in Scotland called Intergold LP, according to leaked records. The bank's records indicated that the payment was for confectionery or sweets. The payment left the ministry's bank account in Ashgabat, passed through Deutsche Bank in New York, and arrived in a Latvian bank account held by Intergold. Yeah, $1.6 million for sweets, huh? Alrighty then. That buys a lot of Hershey bars, folks. Intergold LP was created 10 months before its transactions with the Turkmenistan government records show. Its listed address is a store called Mailboxes Etc. in Glasgow, Scotland. Make this your business address, the storefront suggests. So we have this shell company set up at a Mailboxes Etc. making $1 million transactions, and nobody wants to do anything about it. Meanwhile, God forbid you make one wrong move when it comes to the financial world. God forbid you don't pay your car payment for a month. Intergol has since been renamed SLO 24852LP. It's not clear who owns the business or whether it has any legitimate purpose. And we saw that with Epstein as well, right? How many times we see it move through these banks that he had set up offshore in the Virgin Islands and elsewhere. James Dickens, who signed official registration documents at the time of Intergold's creation, also signed off on accounts for at least 200 other companies in England, according to an ICIJ analysis of companies in the FinCen files. British companies have emerged in recent years as popular tools to hide crooks and corrupt officials' bounties. Well, I don't know about, recent years. Let's be real. The financial system in England has been corrupt since the jump. Oh, I mean, let's be very clear. The template of Wall Street was stolen from the way things were conducted over in England, right? That was where things were really got off to a jump. And then America just amplified all that nonsense, all that corruption. And what we are left with is our current system that we see today. ICIJ was unable to reach Dickens. Daniel O'Donoghue, who also signed Intergold's registration application, told ICIJ that his corporate work is supervised by UK anti-money laundering regulators and meets the required high standards of due diligence. RE, Intergold LP, if you have evidence of a crime, you should pass it to law enforcement, O'Donoghue said. And these are the same regulators that are looking into Jess Staley right now. So I wonder if they can even be trusted. I know that's where we're at in the world, though, right? How do we know who we can trust? How do we know who is looking to really advance justice? All we can go on is by how they conduct themselves and what they do, not what they say. This definitely sounds like a case where a shell company has been used to stash funds from state coffers, said Annette Bohr, a research analyst at London's Chatham House think tank who specializes in Central Asian kleptocracies. They were likely thinking that putting down confectionery will not ring any bells. Yeah, no, putting down $1 million plus in candy, that doesn't ring any bells with anybody. Really? Are you kidding me right now? Turkmenistan's trade ministry did not respond to questions sent via its embassy in the U.S. The ministry's online contact form did not work. Well, yeah, how can you expect their contact form to work? They need to spend $1 million plus on candy. What are you, crazy right now? Priorities, folks, priorities. In documents seen by ICIJ, Deutsche Bank did not explain why it found the transaction suspicious. Look, if we're relying on Deutsche Bank to do anything besides steal, pillage, and create a worse world, then we're going to really set ourselves up for disappointment. In my humble opinion, obviously you can take that with $1.50 and go get some coffee, but Deutsche Bank should be destroyed. They should be put out of business. The bank declined to discuss its relationship with Turkmenistan. It told ICIJ that, in general, discussing potential SARs would be a criminal violation of U.S. and other laws. Banks file SARs regularly and thus help the authorities to catch and prosecute those engaged in criminal activity, the bank said. Deutsche Bank is actively monitoring for suspicious conduct and shares relevant findings with authorities. Yeah, I don't believe it, okay? Deutsche Bank is an absolute shit show, a dump, a place that needs to be done away with. And I haven't even started talking about their predatory lending actions. Deutsche Bank's role in the transactions was a correspondent bank, meaning that it enabled the Turkmen banks used by ministries and well-connected entrepreneurs to convert manats into dollars and pay into other accounts around the world. So they played the middleman. They made sure that the money from Turkmenistan was turned into dollars, and then that way these kleptocrats would have a lot more buying power once they had American currency. It's a familiar role. The German institution was the international vault of choice for Turkmenistan during the murderous regime of former President for Life Sapir Murat Niyazov. Boy, they got some names over there in Turkmenistan, huh? Thank God we're not covering a story that just focuses on that. I would be absolutely destroyed by those names. Deutsche Bank held up to 1/3 of the country's revenue in accounts accessible only by Niyazov, according to Global Witness, an anti-corruption group. One former chairman of the country's central bank told the group that billions of dollars at Deutsche Bank were effectively Niyazov's personal pocket money. It must be nice, huh? Billions of dollars for personal pocket money, while in the meantime you're stealing from your people, oppressing them, and shitting on them. What in the world is going on, folks? And when are we, the people of the world, going to focus our rage where it belongs? A Senegalese in Paris, a Tunisian steeplechaser. On a mild June day this year, Lamine Diack, an octogenarian from Senegal, who was once the most powerful man in international athletics, appeared in a courtroom in northwest Paris to face corruption charges. I am starting to become an old nail, Diack told the courtroom, as he struggled to remember details of the graft during his watch as president of the International Association of Athletics Federations. Diack, in glasses and a blue and white dotted tie, faced prosecutors miles from Hotel California on the Champs-Élysées. It was at a 4-star Art Deco marvel that Diack's son and alleged partner in crime, Papa Masada Diack, made a final splurge before their arrest in 2015, according to bank records sent to FinCen. The younger Diack's $30,000 hotel booking was among 112 payments flagged as suspicious in 2016 by Citibank, according to records. $30,000 on a hotel room. Just let that sink in, folks. 30 grand on a hotel room, while his people are starving, while disease runs rampant. And these banks continue to facilitate it. For years, the bank had witnessed payments to London, Singapore, Doha, Moscow, Beijing, and elsewhere that experts say should have alerted diligent bankers much earlier. If money is going to consulting firms with no employees, luxury stores, that raises red flags, sports governance expert Roger Pilkey told ICIJ. It's not necessarily the money going around the world that's the problem. It's the combination of the money and the destination. And of course, that's a big part of it, right? That plays into it. You have to look at all of the surrounding circumstances of these transactions to truly understand what's going on and to understand who is involved. As IAFF president, the elder Diack joined a vast bribery apparatus that enabled what prosecutors allege to be one of the most audacious doping schemes in sports history. Lamine Diack and his son solicited $3.8 million in bribes, mainly from Russia's sports ministry, to hide the results of drug tests showing that Russian athletes had taken performance-enhancing substances, French prosecutors allege. After the scandal broke, the World Anti-Doping Agency found that elder Diack sanctioned and appeared to have had personal knowledge of the fraud and the extortion of athletes. It also stripped several Russians of medals won in the 2012 Olympic Games. See, this sort of thing, it reaches its tentacles into every facet of our lives, folks. And I can't explain to you how important it is that we end this shit, that the banking industry is completely and utterly revamped. And I don't know what politician has the courage to do it. Maybe none of them, okay? But I don't care. Does that mean I should shut up about it? That I shouldn't be talking about it? This needs to end. Diack also skimmed $1.5 million from Russian sponsorship and television deals to finance an election campaign in Senegal, according to prosecutors. French authorities are investigating whether bribes were paid to influence the selection of host cities for the Olympics and World Championships. Diack did not reply to ICIJ's questions days before publication of the FinCen files. The Paris court sentenced Diack to 4 years in prison for corruption and breach of trust. His lawyers called the decision unfair and bewildering. Papa Masada Diack was sentenced to 5 years in prison for complicity in acts of corruption and fined more than $1 million. Hey, I applaud that, right? Good for them. Let's give them a round of applause. How about the bankers that facilitated it, though? How about the bankers who let it happen? On Twitter, Papa Masada Diack said he was innocent and surprised by the verdict, which he said was based on inadequacies by prosecutors. Both men were cleared of money laundering. They will appeal. Of course they were cleared of money laundering. Who else was involved in it with them? Was it one of the regulators? Maybe. Who the hell knows what's going on in France? We know that France is an absolute shit show right now, like everywhere else in the Western world. So if we're looking at them to provide justice, boy, we're going to be waiting quite some time. DX trial unfolded in Paris. The alleged financial chicanery that put him on the dock was global. Over 72 hours in February 2013, for example, a Senegalese company, Pomadozi Consulting, scattered $1.25 million to a network of unusual clients. A Paris-based jeweler, Lamine Diac, a Russian sports federation, and a retailer selling luxury watches, perfume, and beauty products. Hey, you got to make sure you got that Rolex, right? Got to make sure you have that Breitling. Make sure you have all that good smell. Maybe if you have enough perfume and enough cologne and you spray it everywhere, it could hide the scent of shit wafting off of you. Because that's what you are, Mr. Diac, a shit human. The involvement of this French company in a sports marketing consultancy contract seems to be inconsistent with its declared sector of activity, namely the retail perfume and beauty products trade. France's financial intelligence agency TracFin wrote to prosecutors about the Paris boutique, according to documents seen by ICIJ. It was a lot of cash for a business in downtown Dakar with no obvious website. It took 2 years for Citibank to realize that it had approved transactions that were part of a major sports bribery scandal. Oh yeah, it was an accident. It took us 2 years. I'll tell you what, if you have an account with Citibank, don't pay on it. And then when they contact you, tell them, oh, it was a mistake. I didn't know. I had no idea. And see what the reaction is. Accounts at Standard Chartered, Deutsche Bank, Barclays, JP Morgan Chase, and UBS also sent or received suspicious payments reported to French investigators, according to confidential documents reviewed by ICIJ. Deutsche Bank, Barclays, JP Morgan, Chase, all involved with Epstein, by the way. And again, that's our tie-in. That's why we're talking about this, folks. If these banks were this involved with this sort of money laundering with all of these people, can you imagine what they were facilitating for Epstein and his friends right here in the good old United States of America? Nearly a year after Diac's arrest in 2015, Citibank reported 112 transfers worth $55.7 million, dating back to 2007. One of the most recent suspicious payments, the $30,000 reservation down payment to Hotel California in Paris, was sent a few months before Diac's arrest. A $45,000 wire transfer went to a car dealer in Qatar, and another for $435,000 to a Singapore company, Black Tidings, based in a public housing complex. I mean, none of this is funky, right? None of this should have been looked at by Deutsche Bank or Chase or any of these other shit institutions. How much suffering, how much death, how much anguish has this money laundering facilitated worldwide? The money reported to FinCen was only part of a torrent of dollars, francs, rubles, renminbi, and euros that allegedly went into the pockets of coaches, doctors, administrators, and government administrators in one of sports' grubbiest scandals. And as a huge fan of sports and athletics, I can't stand this sort of shit. And that's why I can't stand the IOC, the International Olympic Committee. Corruption, corruption, corruption. Along the way, athletes were cheated out of lifelong dreams. Russian Yulia Zarapova accepted a gold medal for the 3,000-meter steeplechase at the 2012 London Olympics before a cheering crowd and a global television audience of millions. Tunisian runner Habiba Ghribi finished second. Zarapova was stripped of her victory in 2016 after a retest of a urine sample showed that the drug test positive result had been concealed as part of the Russian doping scheme. Ghribi was later awarded the gold during a small ad hoc Sunday night ceremony near Tunis on the margins of an athletic tournament for young adults. Can you imagine being one of these athletes and being involved in this shit? How can you be a competitor and cheat like this? It just boggles my mind. Losing to a drug cheat cost Grebe tens of thousands of dollars in winnings and sponsorship deals, she told ICIJ reporting partner Intifada. A champion and a runner-up. It isn't the same thing, she said. And folks, look, this FinCen files investigation that they have out and our discussion on it is such a big deal as far as our case is concerned. And if you're really, truly deep into the Epstein case, like I'm sure most of you that are downloading this podcast are, I really suggest that you dig deep into these FinCen files and the Panama Papers, because it is so important to what we discuss on a daily basis. And it is also a look behind the curtain at how people like Jeffrey Epstein insulated themselves from authorities. If you'd like to contact me, you can do that at bobbycapucci@protonmail.com. That's BOBBYCAPUCCI@protonmail.com. If you'd like to find me on Twitter, you can do that as well at BOBBY_CAPUCCI. All of the links that go with this episode, plus a link to the PayPal account for the show, can be found in the description box. All right, everybody, I'll be back later on, and we will pick it up with our daily drop. I hope you all enjoy your Sunday.